It's week 3 and the third full Saturday of this 2024 college football season, live right here on College Football Today on SportsGrid. He is the mastermind of the college football pigskin. That is Joe Lisi. He is OK Dubs. That is Kebin Walsh, and I am Ben Stevens. Week 3 of this 2024 campaign. The theme is rivalries. Maybe earlier in the season than we might expect, but some of the most historic and longest running in all of the sport. The Pac-2, not forgotten anymore, with the Apple Cup and the Civil War on this third full Saturday. An SEC Saturday as well, and it's week number 3. Lisi guy, only one ranked versus ranked game, though, in Columbia, Missouri. The 6th-ranked Tigers host number 24 Boston College, just as we all expected. Maybe the game of the week was last night. Top 20 tilt in the Little Apple in Manhattan. Kansas State dispatching of Arizona 31-7. Big 12 foes, but not a Big 12 game. Before we dive into Saturday, your takeaway from maybe the best game of the entire weekend on a Friday night.
Oh, very impressed with the Kansas State secondary last night. Containing Noah Fifita and McMillan, they scored first, but they made adjustments, contained them, forced them to work down the field. And that physical offensive line of Kansas State guys, they look very inconsistent. Last Saturday on the road in Tulane. They got it going, Kevin, in regards to that rushing attack with Giddens and, more importantly, Avery Johnson, that rush for over 100 yards. This potentially might be a contender in the Big 12.
I will say, as somebody who bet over 1.5 Big 12 teams to make the CFP, I wasn't really banking on K-State, but they were in my back pocket. I'm invested in Arizona, Oklahoma State. I'm high on Utah, as I think a lot of people are with what they bring to the table. But K-State, what they did defensively is what stood out to me. I know Avery Johnson was great on the ground. I still believe in Arizona. No Fifita, McMillan. I think they've got a lot of juice. To score 7 on the opening drive and not again, K-State made a big-time statement.
138 yards of the 268 that Noah Fifita had passing last night into the welcoming arms of T-Mac Teteroa McMillan. But outside of that, not much for Arizona. K-State allowed nearly 500 yards of total offense last week, avoiding a disaster in New Orleans against Tulane. Dominant last night. And the guy who won the Pop-Tarts Bowl MVP award, trying to back it up with a Heisman Trophy, the sophomore quarterback for Kansas State, Avery Johnson, more than 100 yards on the ground. That was last night, one of the 2 ranked versus ranked games that we have. We'll get to what's happening in Columbia in just a little bit. It's one of our CFT games of the week, but the first and foremost, Joe, is a rare non-conference matchup between a Big Ten power and an SEC power. That's Alabama and Wisconsin. The 4th-ranked Crimson Tide make the road trip up to Madison and Camp Randall for the first time since 1928 in nearly a century. 3 consecutive years, though, for Bama going on the road for a non-conference matchup, 2 of the 3 against a power conference foe. Would not be able to tell that from the line. It's nearly 17 points, Joe, in favor of the Crimson Tide. How lopsided do you think the game could look today inside Camp Randall?
Well, if Jalen Milroe and that offense get cooking the way they did in regards to the final 8 minutes against USF, it could be lights out against Tyler Van Dyke and this one-dimensional offense for Wisconsin. Now, the line opened up at 16.5. It fluctuated down to 15.5 midweek. It's back up now to 16.5. We might even see 17s in regards to this number, Kev. But these teams squared off back in 2015 on a neutral field. Was the last time in regards to the last 50, 60 years that these teams played. Bama won that matchup by 18 points. Going to come down to the speed of Bama. If they can exploit that secondary over the top and score first, that could put the pressure on Tyler Van Dyke. This is an offense, guys, only averaging for Wisconsin 200 passing yards per game. They got a non-cover and a win against Western Michigan, a non-cover and a win against South Dakota. They need a better effort in the passing game today to at least cover this number.
And I think they'll get it. I'm on the over in this game at 48.5. It's my favorite total on today's slate. Is Alabama-Wisconsin over that number at 48.5? Part of that is Tyler Van Dyke. I know it's a new system, but this is a kid who's played big games before. Last year, hosting Texas A&M with Miami, they scored 48 points. He throws it all over the field. Scored 31 in ranked games against North Carolina and Louisville as well. The Florida State game, he didn't even throw the ball 10 times, so I erased that from kind of the stat line there. He has played in big games before. This is their biggest yet. Yeah. I know Wisconsin has left a lot of a lot to be desired in their opening 2 games so far, but that's why this total's been crashing. I've seen the number suggest this opened about a touchdown higher, 55.5. So to see where this number is now at 48.5, I think it's a really nice buy low spot on an over. But I'm not just going to bet a Wisconsin team total. No reason to leave Alabama out of this. Last year, Milroe, 4 starts on the road, averaged 35.5 points per game in those road starts. The total was 4-0 to the over in those starts as well. And I think Alabama has a point to prove offensively, Ben, with how slow they started against South Florida. No-showed 75% of that game, still found their way to 42 points.
It was going to be an very interesting fourth quarter for the Crimson Tide. They led 14-3 at the end of 3 last week against South Florida after a Jalen Milroe fumble on the Bulls' 2-yard line, and it was just a 1-point game, tight early in the fourth quarter before Alabama scored a touchdown on the next 4 offensive possessions. Out of their 199 rushing yards against USF, $139 of them came on those final 4 offensive possessions. Joe, when you look at these 2 teams, of course, there's Alabama, ranked 4th in the country, and a Wisconsin team that we know is very, very good. These are 2 of 4 programs around the country in college football that have made a bowl appearance in the last 2 decades consecutively. Wisconsin has been to a bowl game for 22 straight years. Alabama at least 20. Wisconsin's had 10-plus wins in 5 of 6 years up until 2019, but they have not gotten to double digits since that point. It's year 2 under Luke Fickell, and there are some concerns about the Badgers. You mentioned last week against South Dakota, the opener on a Friday night against Western Michigan. Wisconsin winning by 2 touchdowns in each, but not covering as at least an 18.5-point favorite in both. Where does your main concern lie for the Badgers entering this matchup, and what do they need to fix if they're going to keep it within this 16.5-point spread?
I think it's the quarterback position, and I agree with Kevin in regards to Tyler Van Dyke potentially stepping up. His number was 168.5. I think he can get up to $175, 200 today. But think about last year's quarterback, Tanner Mordecai, and Phil Longo's offense, right? With Phil Longo and Drake May and Sam Howell, he was supposed to put up dynamic numbers. 14 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. They averaged well under 200 yards in a multitude of games down the stretch. This game needs to be in the area of about 250. They need to stretch and put pressure on Alabama's secondary. If they cannot do that, they're going to be in long third downs, Kevin, and then it's lights out for that Bama defense.
I'm really interested to see what Milroe does as a runner today. 2 touchdowns in each of the first 2 games this season. He is off to a Heisman caliber start this year, just relative to the numbers. But last year, big issue with Milroe would be the sacks. There would be games his probably would be 35.5, and you'd be sitting there in the middle of the third quarter with negative rushing yards on your card. Yeah. Last week, 2 yards is where he finished up. The week prior, though, against Western Kentucky, 79. This is who Milroe was last year in terms of the final box score as a runner. It was rarely was he finishing with 40 yards. It was these huge games, and he's like, how does he have negative yards with what he is as a runner? I want to see what he does against Wisconsin. Certainly slated to be the best defense that they've played so far this season.
You mentioned Jalen Milroe and what he did through the air in those games on the road last year. At least 2 passing touchdowns in their final 3 road tests in SEC play at A&M, at Kentucky, at Auburn. Also at least 36 yards on the ground in 3 of their 4 true road games a season ago. Joe, on the other side, Tyler Van Dyke is the story for Wisconsin. 203 yards per game, never more than 215 in his first 2 in the, quote, dairy raid under Phil Longo, but it's been anything but a dairy raid so far. How does Wisconsin have to open it up to attack this Alabama defense?
I think it's critical that they score first, right? Get this Camp Randall crowd in regards to this matchup. If they're in it, potentially crowd noise could get to Milroe. You could force turnovers. If Alabama scores first and jumps up by a double-digit lead, could be lights out, because then they're playing from behind, guys.
We'll see about the status of Oklahoma transfer running back for Wisconsin, Tawee Walker. He had 15 carries for 66 yards and a touchdown in the opener. Luke Fickell says he's hopeful. The ranked versus ranked game in Columbia next.
You say this is a smash. I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson.
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. You know, they've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy Sports Today, only on SportsGrid.
He had 4 grabs in the first half for just over 30 yards, was injured, came back in briefly, and then had to be carted off.
We were pessimistic on Puka Nakua's injury to the same right knee, of that being a nothing, just a bursa, and that's it, as per Sean McVay. We felt there could be a small PCL component.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Everyone had him Rookie of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, Bears are going to the Super Bowl, Eberflus Coach of the Year. He was terrible.
If he's going to be a success, he's got to play within structure as much as possible. I get it. If the pocket breaks down, throw off the platform. That's fine. But within structure, when the play is there to be made, you need to make it, and he didn't do that.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
147 yards against the Jets and a touchdown? I mean, the numbers are incredible.
It's the Shanahan connection, and that's just what it feels like. And, Jordan Mason came into that game with a career 5.6 yards per carry. He's always been a very tough runner. He's always been good when called upon in small doses. You mentioned the yardage, which was impressive, but 28 carries. That's what I'm looking at.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to this Saturday Live right here on College Football Today on SportsGrid. Joe Lisi, Kebin Walsh, and Ben Stevens. Our only ranked versus ranked top 25 tilt of this Week 3 Saturday is in Columbia, Missouri. It's 6th-ranked Missouri hosting number 24 Boston College. If you had that on the bingo card, that the only Week 3 Saturday top 25 matchup would be BC and Missouri, cash that ticket and take it to the window. We hope to give you a few more here on this Saturday. Kev, we start with you. This line actually working slightly back to BC over the last 24 hours. 16.5 yesterday on a Friday afternoon. You saw the graphic there, 15 and a hook. On this Saturday morning, just slightly north of 2 touchdowns, 14.5 in favor of Missouri. It's a top 25 tilt. The line working back to the Eagles, but still north of 2 touchdowns. Just how competitive is this ranked versus ranked game?
Well, I wonder if Bill O'Brien is letting them know that nobody believes that this is game of the week, no matter what those numbers next to their name says. This game's on SEC Network. It starts at 12:45. There's no profit boost associated with this game whatsoever, yet it is ranked for now, with a couple of teams being able to sneak in due to wins over Florida State, who's absolutely terrible, though maybe today they can have a little bit of juice. The interesting thing for me is this dropping number, and if it gets to a flat 14, I'd probably be in on Missouri at that type of price. It's very tough to tell. The early returns for the Missouri schedule, it's Buffalo, it's Murray State.
Yep.
It's also as good as you can do. You haven't allowed a point. The yards per play is all great. The Missouri, if you were trying to give out an award for best defense in college football, they'd at least deserve a seat at the table through 2 weeks. That's pretty much all you can ask for. And I think at times with Missouri, the selling point, people want it to be Brady Cook and Luther Burden. For Boston College here, going on the road, you wonder how much of this is Bill O'Brien just being an A++ higher. That, again, I would probably need flat 14, if not under, to back Missouri. There's a prop I'll get to in this game that I think has some value. As far as the side, though, it's tricky because on one end, Mizzou's defense is rock star, and on the Boston College side, Bill O'Brien's rock star.
Yeah, and a contrast in real styles, right? We have Boston College that's averaging 282 rushing yards per game and averaging well over 400 yards in total offense. They want to run it with Castellanos, their quarterback, and Trayshawn Ward. And on the flip side, Brady Cook wants to chuck it, right? They're averaging well over 400 yards per game. They're averaging 286 through the air. And to Kevin's point, defense is rock solid. Yeah. This line was very shocking to me when it came out in regards to Sunday night because, again, it was similar to the Clemson App State line, right? 16.5, 17. App State very good on the road, and Clemson blew their doors off.
Yeah.
I think they're begging you. Like, I'm not betting this game personally, but when it came out, it's like, why wouldn't you want to take Boston College on the road with O'Brien and Castellanos? I think it could be close for a quarter or two. In the second half, though, I really feel that Missouri has a speed advantage, and that's where I think they pull away. The fact that they're at home, SEC going up against ACC, that's the difference.
Early returns, Kev, to your point, great for both of these teams and for that hire in Chestnut Hill. Bill O'Brien has Boston College ranked in the top 25 for the first time since 2018, just the second time into the AP top 25 since 2008. This is the first ranked versus ranked game for the Eagles since Matt Ryan was quarterbacking things in Chestnut Hill way back in 2007. Both teams 2-0 against the spread. BC won outright victory as an underdog, of course, in the upset over Florida State. 6-4 ATS as an underdog since the start of 2023. 5 of those 6 covers in outright victory. And Kevin's interesting about Boston College with Thomas Castellanos back at the quarterback spot. This is an Eagles offense that has been running the football. 263 against FSU, north of 300 last week, albeit against an FCS foe in Duquesne, but still more than 300 yards. But on the other side, you have the nation's best scoring defense currently, averaging 0.0 points per game allowed because Mizzou has planked its first 2 opponents. Murray State, the FCS foe, week number 1. Not a great Buffalo team out of the MAC, but still, you win 31-zip, you do what you can, and Corey Batoon, the new defensive coordinator, taking over for Blake Baker, who was poached by LSU, has been really good here in the opening 2 games.
When you're up 89-0 on aggregate and have allowed the fewest passing yards per game in the country, that's pretty impressive because teams should exclusively be throwing on you. And it's not as if Castellanos checks in with a huge desire to throw the football today, but that's where it gets interesting. If the strength of the Missouri defense is the secondary, how effective will that be here against Boston College? I will say on Missouri, this is now 2 weeks in a row where you've mentioned where they are ranked, and I know you always know your stuff. I go and check, like, oh, he just said the completely wrong thing. You started like, 6th ranked Missouri. I'm like, this kid's nuts. He's going off his own top 10. What's he talking about? I can't believe every time they're in your own top 10, I'm like, oh my God, this kid loves Missouri. And they're 6th in the country. It doesn't even feel right to me. That's what is one of the things that makes this such an exciting matchup is to see if Missouri can live up to that type of number of 6th in the country. It's like a sureflyer, college football playoff team. I'll say this quickly as far as the prop I'm on today. Luther Burden over 7.5 receiving yards. It's an attempt to buy low. Last season, Burden had a 33% target share with this Missouri group. Off to this start this year, 10.1. He has 7 targets in 2 games. Theo Wees has a 29% target share. All of a sudden, he's wide receiver 1. He's a little banged up coming into this football game. It's also the first real opponent they're playing, which is I think we can all agree on, which should get the football to Burden a little bit more. Books would have expected that they would be posting him in the mid-90s. To get 70.5, I'm going over Luther Burden.
I like the look, and the reason why I say that is because Boston College has given up 173 passing yards per game, but they weren't challenged by Duquesne and certainly weren't challenged really by Florida State in regards to the first half. It was in a second half type of environment after they built a double-digit lead, right? So start in regards to Brady Cook and that offense. If they challenge them early, then they're going to be up against it. Haven't allowed a touchdown just yet through the air. We'll see if they give it up today.
Brady Cook only has 1 passing touchdown this year, but 3 utilizing his legs on the ground. Last year against 6 ranked opponents, that's what you would expect for this Tigers team in SEC play. 8 touchdowns to 6 INTs, but at least 275 passing yards in all 6 of those games. Eli Drinkwitz in his time in Columbia. Since the start of 2021, Missouri is 9-11 against the spread as the favored side. Last year, when they won double-digit games, 4-3 ATS. Thomas Castellanos last year in 2 games versus ranked foes had at least 95 yards on the ground, including against SMU in the Fenway Bowl, a $156 and 2 scores. Plenty more on this third full Saturday of the season next.
You say this is a smash. I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson.
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. They've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy sports today, only on SportsGrid.
He had 4 grabs in the first half for just over 30 yards, was injured, came back in briefly, and then had to be carted off.
We were pessimistic on Puka Nakua's injury to the same right knee, of that being a nothing, just a bursa, and that's it, as per Sean McVay. We felt there could be a small PCL component.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Everyone had him Rookie of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, Bears are going to the Super Bowl, Eberflus Coach of the Year. He was terrible.
If he's going to be success, he's got to play within structure as much as possible. I get it. If the pocket breaks down, throw off the platform. That's fine. But within structure, when the play is there to be made, you need to make it, and he didn't do that.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
147 yards against the Jets and a touchdown? I mean, the numbers are incredible.
It's the Shanahan connection, and that's just what it feels like. And, Jordan Mason came into that game with a career 5.6 yards per carry. He's always been a very tough runner. He's always been good when called upon in small doses. You mentioned the yardage, which was impressive, but 28 carries. That's what I'm looking at.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
A rivalry Saturday in college football that we'll get to in just a little bit, and an SEC Saturday as well. A ton of SEC openers around the conference for some of the programs expected to contend for a conference crown. That includes LSU, despite the loss in the opening week on that Sunday night in Sin City. It is game number 1 of SEC play in year number 3 for the Bayou Bengals under Brian Kelly. Not the SEC opener, Lisi guy, for the South Carolina Gamecocks, but the SEC home opener in Columbia, South Carolina. They're 6.5-point home underdogs against LSU. Last week in the true opener for the Cox on the road in Lexington against Kentucky, South Carolina won outright in dominant fashion as a 9.5-point dog, 31-6. Can Shane Beamer in South Carolina replicate the upset special today at home?
It's possible. I think when you look at it, these teams haven't met in Columbia, South Carolina since 2008. Now, from the series perspective, it's been dominated by LSU, 19-2-1 in regards to the series record. And people, I think, are just sleeping on LSU or sort of just pushing them to the side because of the Week 1 performance against USC and, more importantly, the win and no cover against Nicholls State. But they still have the better passing attack with Nussmeier heading into this matchup. You look at Norris Sellers and that offense for South Carolina, Kev, they're only averaging 165 passing yards per game. They're methodical, completing only 54% of their passes. And again, in my opinion, to cover this line, they're going to need to play a perfect game, and that's where I give the edge to the speed of LSU. Look out for the rushing attack today. I think they dominate.
So often we get these college games and we kind of do some side-by-side, some positional comparisons, some different matchups. This is one of the sneaky best matchups we will have all year. Dylan Stewart, the 6-star freshman, looks amazing. Will Campbell and Emory Jones could both start in the NFL today. And they're back here at LSU. They're both likely going in the top 10. one of two things will happen. Either Dylan Stewart will be advised to sit out for the next 2 years and just enjoy going top 3 when the time comes, or, hey, you're a freshman. And eventually, you'll be ready, and this will do great for you, Stewart, but you're about to learn a tough lesson, because it's not like you can go to the other side and, all right, Aiden Hutchinson, I know we're doing a little NFL, but Aiden Hutchinson, there was a backup left tackle that got thrown in for the Rams, like, I'll just line up over there and dominate. There's no break here for Dylan Stewart. They're not going to line the kid up on the interior. But that is why, to me, it's a bit of a bully game for LSU. I think they need to come out here and not just look to win a tough SEC game. I think they need to make a statement. It is very clear to me that this team's expectations have been shifted far too much off of a loss to what I think is a good USC team. Again, that was super competitive, and in some aspects, I feel like they should have won, and they let get away from them. Okay, so there was a close game against Nichols for a little bit. I don't think it was that close. South Carolina should have lost to Old Dominion in week 1. So they beat Kentucky. Kentucky might be terrible. Brock Vandegrift might be terrible. It's very on the board. I agree with you, Joe. I think LSU's the side here all the way under a touchdown.
Only 44 passing yards for Kentucky as a team last week. Brock Vandegrift, the Georgia transfer, he'll play his former team today for UK. Gavin Wimsatt, the Rutgers transfer. They had nothing going. And even on the ground, 46 carries as a team for the Cats for just $139. That's 3 yards per pop. South Carolina won by 25 as nearly a double-digit dog with only putting up 252 yards of total offense themselves. The spectacled quarterback behind you, Joe, that's the freshman Lenora Sellers, 166 yards or less in each of the first 2 this year for the Gamecocks. Garrett Nussmeier, at least 302 passing yards in the first 2 games for LSU. Six touchdown tosses last week against Nichols. However, they did not cover as a 44.5-point favorite. But I do want to go right back to you, Joe. And it's to your point as well, Kev. On the outside, you've got Will Campbell, best left tackle in football. Maybe the best right tackle opposite him in Emory Jones Jr. Dylan Stewart has been incredible. 2.5 sacks, 2.5 tackles for loss. Last week, South Carolina, 5 sacks and 11 tackles for loss against Kentucky. But, Lisi, guy, are you concerned about LSU establishing the run? Just 68 yards last week against Nichols.
No, I'm not. I actually think they get it going today. Everybody's looking Nussmeier through the air. I think they run it with Josh Williams and Caleb Jackson, especially now with the injury to John Emery. They have the more physical offensive line. And Brian Kelly, dating back 7 years to 2017, a 670 winning percentage on the road or on a neutral field. You need to win the turnover battle, and you need to run the football. It starts today in Williams-Brice.
LSU just one of 34 teams, Kev, that has not covered a number so far this year at the FBS level. But in their first 2 SEC openers under Brian Kelly, both against Mississippi State, they've won both by 2 touchdowns. 12-8 against the spread as the favorite under BK. Plenty more with the rivalries coming up next.
You say this is a smash, I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson.
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. They've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy sports today, only on SportsGrid.
He had 4 grabs in the first half for just over 30 yards, was injured, came back in briefly, and then had to be carted off.
We were pessimistic on Puka Nakua's injury to the same right knee, of that being a nothing, just a bursa, and that's it, as per Sean McVay. We felt there could be a small PCL component.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Everyone had him Rookie of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, Bears are going to the Super Bowl, Eberflus Coach of the Year. He was terrible.
If he's going to be a success, he's got to play within structure as much as possible. I get it. If the pocket breaks down, throw off the platform. That's fine. But within structure, when the play is there to be made, you need to make it, and he didn't do that.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, Only on SportsGrid.
147 yards against the Jets and a touchdown? Man, the numbers are incredible.
It's the Shanahan connection, and that's just what it feels like. And, Jordan Mason came into that game with a career 5.6 yards per carry. He's always been a very tough runner. He's always been good when called upon in small doses. You mentioned the yardage, which was impressive, but 28 carries. That's what I'm looking at.
Newswire. Only on SportsGrid.
Last week here on College Football Today, we react to Notre Dame going on the road, week number 1, handling business in College Station against Texas A&M, outright as an underdog against the Aggies. So when Notre Dame returns home last week for the home opener in year 3 under Marcus Freeman, under the watchful eye of Touchdown Jesus against Northern Illinois as a 4-touchdown favorite, it's supposed to be easy going. It was not. Northern Illinois' first ever win against an AP top 10 team. The largest upset from the spread perspective we had seen since the 2021 college football season. And Kebin Walsh, I do feel sorry to start with you, but we do go to your opinion on the Fighting Irish. A difficult game last week, a large upset in South Bend to the hands of NIU. Another in-state game for Notre Dame this week in a rivalry, the 88th all-time matchup as they travel to West Lafayette to take on Purdue. This line working against the Irish. It was near double digits earlier in the week, now just a 7.5-point spread. What resolve do you think we see today out of Marcus Freeman's club?
Who cares? I mean, honestly, who cares? What a joke. What an embarrassment. People probably figure they're going to get a certain taker. Sorry to start with me, right? My Notre Dame allegiance. Most unbiased man history of sports media.
You all know it.
3 people here. 2 of them picked this team to make the playoff, and then there was me. Because I don't trust this team. I don't trust this schedule. Everybody said, and here's the thing. This game today, you can see it on the line. It's a dangerous spot. These are the kind of games that I was worried about with this team, and they might lose this game today. And if they do, Marcus Freeman does not deserve another game. But Marcus Freeman doesn't deserve another season. They would have been better off if they lost to Texas A&M and beat Northern Illinois. Their season is likely done. They will have to run the table and will still be potentially left on the cutting room floor of making the college football playoff. Look at the movement. Minus 410 to make the CFP. They're now 3-1. And again, that 3-1 does jump off the page as a bit generous. And that is, to me, ultimately the biggest thing. They're playing Purdue, and my honest breakdown, aside from loving under 47.5, is who cares? They win this game, and it keeps them ranked. Okay? And if they lose this game, they should very much so fire Marcus Freeman. That's not an overreaction. You cannot lose in South Bend to Northern Illinois laying 4 scores. You can't lose to Marshall in South Bend laying 3 scores. You can't lose to an atrocious Stanford team at home. You can't do it. You can't step up and beat Clemson and step up and beat USC and hand it back when you beat Louisville. You can't do it. And that's what Marcus Freeman does. Big game gets everybody up. Season's over, apparently. Now the season is actually over because you no-show at home. There's no pride in that. These teams have fortresses, the best teams in college football. You don't go to Bryant-Denny. You don't go to Death Valley, whether that's LSU or Clemson. You don't go between the hedges and even dare think of pulling off an upset of that size. You don't dare. If you're Tennessee Tech, you got out of there, you didn't get shut out, and it's the best night of your lives. Northern Illinois walks into that building, and into the game, the head coach is telling Marcus Freeman, you want me to help you out and let me know what we saw? And Freeman's like, yes, please. Here's what the kid should really do. He should go over and tell Freeman, get on my staff next year. You'll be lucky if I make you a DC and a MAC. Garbage. Trash.
Preach,
I like
brother.
Under 47.5. Love under 47.5.
Preach, brother. I'll just say this. You're all right? You okay? I know. He's frustrated. That was
beautiful, though.
That was eloquent. It was gorgeous. Great breakdown. He's right. They can't lose a game outright as a 28.5-point favorite to Northern Illinois. First MAC loss in the history of Notre Dame. That was a garbage loss. And more importantly, quarterbacks. You got Sam Hartman last year. You got Riley Leonard this year. Upgrades from what Brian Kelly had, taking those teams to the college football playoff. And you limp in regards to the passing attack. Can't happen today. I do like Riley Leonard and this team to bounce back in a little bit of a way. The reason why, Ben, is because we talked about the Purdue bye week, the fact that they were so consistent in regards to the passing attack. How can Hudson Card duplicate that? 24-25, 96%. It's only going to go down. And the fact that the bye week came after week one is more of a detriment. This was better a bye week at the end of September, not after 1 week. Now it's like a week one game again. So Notre Dame's won 8 straight. I think the game will be won in the trenches. It's going to be ugly maybe early on. They'll pull away. I do feel they cover. I do disagree with Kevin. I do feel it gets over the 47.5 because of turnovers, but we'll see how it plays out.
The Shillelagh Trophy, a Celtic club for war. That's what they play for today. It's actually the second Shillelagh Trophy that Notre Dame plays for. The jeweled Shillelagh against Southern Cal. I found that interesting on this rivalry Saturday. Purdue has only played one game this year, to Lisi's point. 49-zip over FCS foe Indiana State to start the season back in week one. Hudson Card, 24 of 25, 273 yards, and 4 touchdowns. The second most efficient passer in college football to this point, only behind Ole Miss's Jackson Dart. But Purdue entered this year with the lowest win total in the Big Ten at 4.5. That was it for year number 2 under Ryan Walters, who was the defensive coordinator for Illinois back in 2022, and the Illini had the best scoring defensive output in the country. Last year, the Boilermakers were the worst scoring defense in the Big Ten. You know the Soldier Boy meme on Breakfast Club? That guy stole my whole flow, bar for bar. That's Purdue looking at Northern Illinois last week. The Huskies upsetting an AP top 5 team in Notre Dame. Purdue known as the Spoilermakers for their 17 wins against AP top 5 opponents. Now Notre Dame 18th in the AP top 25. You saw the movement earlier. Greater than a $4 favorite were the Irish to reach the college football playoff entering week 2 after the monumental victory in the opening Saturday of the season. Now a 17-1 price with a plus in front. So, how good does a bye week do a team during week 2? We'll find out for Purdue today, Joe. We'll also find out for Florida State. A dismal winless 0-2 start, both in ACC affairs to begin this season. Bye week, week number 2. Back inside Doak Campbell today, week number 3 in Tallahassee. And less than a touchdown favorite is FSU against a really quality AAC team in Memphis. How do you break down the matchup between the Noles and the Tigers?
Yeah, it's a tough one. And to your point, this is where the bye week is beneficial. But what is the identity of Florida State? Last year, they wanted to run the football, average around 160 rushing yards per game, and work off of play action with Jordan Travis. They have no offensive identity with DJU. That's a cause of concern. This line in the offseason, guys, was 28.5 in favor of Florida State. You're seeing it opened at 4.5. They bet it up to 5.5 now. My heart does tell me Florida State, but if I'm not betting this game, but Seth Hennigan is the better quarterback and the more consistent offense heading into this matchup. I did pick Memphis to make the college football playoff as the best group of 5. I just think they're more balanced. Don't be shocked if they hand right now Florida State their 3rd loss. Again, they're just more consistent and they're playing with house money. Again, if I had to bet it, I would take the points, I think, but it's a tricky one.
As I calm down, just look, some advice. If Freeman and Norvell lose today, they can go join Connor Stallion's staff. Maybe they can figure it out on the high school end of it. I actually laid the number with Florida State here. I'm not as in on Memphis this season. I think there's enough defensive turnover from them year over year where FSU should be able to move the football. And this is where I'm actually betting on Mike Norvell. Again, with Freeman, there are spots you bet Marcus Freeman, like when he's a dog. And with Norvell, there are spots where you bet him, like when he's coming off of a bye. 3 straight years, he's got the job absolutely done coming off of a bye. No team needed a bye week more than Florida State. Again, they did scheduling malpractice.
Right.
Yeah.
Not go to Dublin and play a conference game, and then you do not return from Dublin and play another conference game. They're scheduling malpractice. I'm not saying I predicted them to be 0-2. I'm not stunned that they would have lost one of those games. Yeah. This is a get-right spot for Florida State against the Memphis team that I'm relatively not as high on. Under a touchdown, I had to back the Seminoles.
It is really interesting when you look at Memphis, a team that won 10 games last year in the 4th year with Ryan Silverfield, a program in general that has won at least 7 games, 8 of the last 9 full college football seasons, double-digit wins in 4 of those 8 years. Memphis last year, 11 times over in 13 games. A defense that has allowed at least 27 points per game in each of the last 3 seasons. Can DJU and this Florida State rushing attack take advantage against a Tigers defense that has not been great? It's a low total at 52.5. Memphis, one of 9 teams around the country to play 60% of their games to the over in the last 3 seasons. In-state rivalries that mean a lot on this Saturday. Next.
You say this is a smash, I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson.
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. You know, they've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy sports today, only on SportsGrid.
He had 4 grabs in the first half for just over 30 yards, was injured, came back in briefly, and then had to be carted off.
We were pessimistic on Puka Nakua's injury to the same right knee, of that being a nothing, just a bursa, and that's it, as per Sean McVay. We felt there could be a small PCL component.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Everyone had him rookie of the year, offensive player of the year. Bears are going to the Super Bowl. Eberflus coach of the year. He was terrible.
If he's going to be success, he's got to play within structure as much as possible. I get it. If the pocket breaks down, throw off the platform. That's fine. But within structure, when the play is there to be made, you need to make it, and he didn't do that.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
147 yards against the Jets and a touchdown? I mean, the numbers are incredible.
It's the Shanahan connection, and that's just what it feels like. And, Jordan Mason came into that game with a career 5.6 yards per carry. He's always been a very tough runner. He's always been good when called upon in small doses. You mentioned the yardage, which was impressive, but 28 carries. That's what I'm looking at.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
I'm sure you all saw the news. You probably stayed up to around midnight Eastern on Wednesday into Thursday of the Pac-2 having some life. The addition starting in 2026 as the Pac-12 comes back from the dead of Boise State, Colorado State, Fresno State, and San Diego State, exiting the Mountain West and joining the six-pack, the Pac-12, as they try to bring back their branding. And I do not believe the timing was just a coincidence to make that announcement this week, where we have 2 of the longest-standing rivalries in the sport that used to be played forever between conference competitors. It's the Civil War in Corvallis between Oregon State and Oregon, and it's the Apple Cup in Seattle between Wazoo and Washington. Lisi guy, we start with Oregon and Oregon State. North of a 3-score spread. Oregon has not covered a number so far this year. In fact, they have the second worst cover percentage in the country, 27 points per game, missing out on the expectation. Only a fraudulent program in Lubbock, Texas, has a worse cover margin in the negatives. Yep, I said it. I said it. But, Lisi, again, our focus is not on slandering each other. It's breaking down college football games on this rivalry Saturday. 17.5-point spread in favor of the Ducks is a lofty expectation. And although Oregon State was gutted as the Pac-12 dissolved last year, They have been really good in Corvallis. This is the 128th all-time meeting between these two schools. It's the 5th longest rivalry at the FBS level. What gives today in Corvallis?
Well, something has to give because I expect Oregon to bounce back and at least get back to where we thought they would be at the start of the year. Shocked that they've been walking through the motions between Idaho and Boise State. We know the offense is still prolific with Dylan Gabriel completing, 83% of his passes. On the flip side, for Oregon State, they want to run it. They're averaging well over 200 yards per game, ground and pound type of attack. I do feel their passing attack is a little bit limited with their quarterback, Giovanni McCoy. They need to stay in manageable third down situations. I'm not betting this game, but if I had to, Oregon won this battle last year in the trenches, 31-7. They beat them up. I think they do it again. Might be a slow start, but in the second half they pull away. And I'll just say this: Taj Brooks back for Texas Tech today with the arm injury.
All right. Well, the Texas Tech love sneaks in. I got to say, I look at the Oregon State 2 games. Did the Big Ten take the wrong Oregon? I mean, they're running the football on 73% of their plays. They have the 4th most rushing yards, 4th most rushing attempts. I mean,
dominant, baby.
But it's also Service Academy-esque. And when you go up against the Armies and the Navies of the world, you don't want to lay this type of number. I can only look towards Oregon State as far as this spread goes here. Checking in at over 17.5 on the road as well. And that is, again, not even necessarily tied to the Oregon struggles that have been jumping off the page. It is more tied to what Oregon State looks like they want to be. It's hard to extend on a team that runs the football play after play after play, just completely burning the clock. I do want to ask a quick question to the both of you, though. As I mentioned that my issue with Oregon initially, more than anything, was the price. They were booked as if they were up close to a Georgia and Ohio State level. Completely shifted. Through 2 games that they've won, that number is down to 11-1. Do you feel, I'll go to you, Joe, that that's an overreaction, or that now Oregon, as I feel, is more appropriately tiered away from Georgia and Ohio State?
I would say appropriately tiered until they face off against Ohio State in early October. I think right now the perception was, from a physicality standpoint, and Ben could bring this up as well, they had the most physical offense and defensive line potentially heading into the Big Ten this year with the likes of Ohio State, maybe Michigan, right? They averaged $184 last year, held opposing offenses to 102 rushing yards per game. All right, week 1 they struggle with a FCS opponent, Idaho, no big problem. All right, but then last week, when Austin Gentry torches your defense again for over 100 yards and you go toe-to-toe, they needed an unbelievable drive at the end to just win that game. In Eugene was an amazing, I think, perception gauge. So now, I think they are priced accordingly, and until they step up from the defensive side of the ball, guys, that's not going to change.
Last-second field goal inside Autzen Stadium, and Ashton Genty is still running in Eugene, 192 yards and 3 touchdowns. We'll talk about the Heisman frontrunner, in my estimation, a little bit later on. But 3 of the 5 guys for Oregon up front on the offensive line returned, including both tackles. That's Josh Connerly and a Johnny Cornelius, and left guard Marcus Harper II. Those 3 guys combined for more than 4,700 snaps played together throughout their collegiate career. Yes, you lose Jackson Powers to the National Football League. That is understandable. But this is an Oregon team that has allowed 7 sacks through 2 games. They gave up 5 all of last season in 14 total games. There should be concern. And with Genty running all over Oregon last week, there's concern on that side of the football as well for what Oregon will do. And I'll make this final point about Oregon State. In Corvallis, the last 2 years, 16-3 against the spread. There's been no better cover team at home, or excuse me, the last 3 years in that 3-year span. They're covering in more than 84% of their games. No other FBS program is covering in more than 72% of their games at home. And in that 3-year timeline, 3-0 against the number as a home underdog. Kev, from the Civil War to the Apple Cup, the 116th all-time meeting between Washington and Washington State. This game in Seattle, not at Husky Stadium. It's at Lumen Field, where the Seattle Seahawks play. So technically a neutral site there in the great state of Washington. 5.5-point spread in favor of UW, but Wazoo is 2-0. They won outright last week against Texas Tech as a 2.5-point home underdog on the Palouse. How do you break down this matchup?
My head is still spinning. Look at the John Mateer statistics. In first game, he throws for about 350. The second game, he runs for nearly 200. Does Washington State have themselves a potential superstar at the quarterback position? He has one of the 5 or 6 best passer ratings early season.
You love this note, Gutty. I mean, this kid's a gamer. I mean, here's the thing. When I break down this game, right, rivalry game, it means just as much to Washington State to prove a point, and I'm not sold on Will Rogers. Very turnover-prone in big spots. I've lost a ton of money on him. Give me Mateer with the points.
Will Rogers has been good in Jed Fish's offense, as you would expect. He excelled in the air raid under Mike Leach. 261 last week for Rogers, 4 touchdowns against Eastern Michigan. They won by 3 touchdowns, did the Huskies, but they did not cover. More in-state rivalries next.
You say this is a smash. I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson.
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. You know, they've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy sports today, only on SportsGrid.
He had 4 grabs in the first half for just over 30 yards, was injured, came back in briefly, and then had to be carted off.
We were pessimistic on Puka Nakua's injury to the same right knee, of that being a nothing, just a bursa, and that's it, as per Sean McVay. We felt there could be a small PCL component.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Everyone had him rookie of the year, offensive player of the year. Bears are going to the Super Bowl. Eberflus coach of the year. He was terrible.
If he's going to be a success, he's got to play within structure as much as possible. I get it. If the pocket breaks down, throw off the platform. That's fine. But within structure, when the play's there to be made, you need to make it, and he didn't do that.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
147 yards against the Jets and a touchdown? I mean, the numbers are incredible.
It's the Shanahan connection, and that's just what it feels like. And, Jordan Mason came into that game with a career 5.6 yards per carry. He's always been a very tough runner. He's always been good when called upon in small doses. You mentioned the yardage, which was impressive, but 28 carries. That's what I'm looking at.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
In-state rivalries and rivalries on this desk, live right here on College Football Today. Joe Lisi, Kebin Walsh, and Ben Stevens. We go from former Pac-12 competition to a renewed rivalry as of late. The Rocky Mountain Showdown, the first time in Fort Collins since 1996. Colorado State hosts Colorado, of course, on a Friday night last year. With the eyes of a college football country on Boulder, CU did win 43-35, but in double overtime. The Rams of CSU covering as a 24.5-point underdog. Kev, this one, 7.5 points in favor of CU on the road in Fort Collins. Last week on the road in Lincoln was not good for the Buffs. 28-10, they fall flat in another rivalry against Nebraska. Come nowhere close to covering as a 7.5-point underdog. How do the Buffs bounce back in this rivalry matchup against Colorado State?
This is possibly the biggest game Deion's coached at Colorado since the opening game against TCU last season. If they win and cover, they sit 2-1 entering Big 12 play, and they can tell themselves the world's right in front of them. Mm-hmm. If they lose this game, they are not only dead in the water, but at that point, Why is Shedeur going to stay out there and take hits? And I mentioned this a little bit in kind of some of our preseason previews. I think it's very on the board if they have a lost season that Shedeur shuts it down. We all know he's going to the league next year. And also, he does not let's call it, he doesn't care enough to stay out there and get hit by nonstop the way he buries his offensive linemen after these games. Why is Travis Hunter playing in these games? We know he's going to the league next year as well. It's very rare to have multiple top 10 picks play on a 3-4 win football team, which would be the trajectory that they would be heading if they lose this game.
Right.
Deion has not been able to run it up on anyone. They last year played Colorado State. Does anybody remember what that spread was?
Yeah, 16.5.
24.5.
24.5.
What? It was?
I don't know if you teased it, bet it live. I'll let you know. 24.5. Now it's 7.5. We can flip home field advantage all we want. I forget spread math. I'm not betting this game.
Right.
I do not trust Colorado enough to lay over a touchdown. If it was 6.5, I would be betting them. I'm not doing it. This is a game, though, it truly. Deion, if he is a power level coach, he has them dialed, focused, and dominant here in this game.
Yeah, the one concern I have in regards to Colorado is the same old. Offensive line now through 2 games, 7 sacks. They can't run it, averaging 37 yards per game, 1.6 yards per rush. And again, they're going to need that type of effort on the road. Now, on the flip side for Colorado State, Fowler Nicolisi.
Fowler Nicolisi.
There you go. They averaged 306 passing yards per game last year.
Yeah.
Averaging 138 entering this matchup.
Crazy.
So,
Horton's
again, it's a rivalry game. It's at home. I'm inclined to take this 7.5, and I'll just say this. If we're going to alt anything today, I'm going to alt the Colorado State passing attack just because if they're going to win, this is going to be a shootout just the way it was last year. And again, I don't think this is a ground and pound. Let's get this game into the fourth quarter and win it 17-13. I would be shocked if that occurs today.
Listen, 63.5 was the total a year ago. And to the aerial attack, Shedeur Sanders last year, 348 yards, 4 touchdowns, and an interception. Braden Fowler Nicolosi, 367 yards, 3 touchdowns, albeit 3 interceptions. Torrey Horton explodes onto the scene with 16 grabs for $133 and a touchdown. Last week, Shedeur Sanders sacked 5 times against Nebraska. Last year against CSU, 4 sacks suffered. Colorado did allow 149 rushing yards against the Huskers a week ago. And although the passing attack has weirdly not been there for Jay Norvell and the Rams, last week, albeit FCS foe in northern Colorado, Colorado State did run for 224 yards, and Justin Marshall, their lead back, put up more than 100 against a really stout Texas front in the season opener. Stop me if you've heard this before. Cam Rising's status is in doubt for the Utah Utes. The 108th all-time meeting between Utah and Utah State. This one in Logan. This the first meeting since 2015, Kev. And the last time we were in Logan back in 2012, the Aggies actually won outright. Again, Cam Rising more than likely not playing today. Injured his throwing hand late in the opening half last week against Baylor, but still a 17.5-point spread in favor of the Utes. What gives today?
Bryson Barnes goes for Utah State last year on Utah, filled in for Rising, so he's kind of familiar with watching Cam Rising not play for Utah. I would only look Utah State. This, though, to me, Utah has Oklahoma State on deck. So now, guess what? Next week, one of the biggest games, we'll have no idea if Cam Rising's available until they kick off, which I cannot wait for. Can't stand this team.
Unbelievable. I like Utah State, but keep an eye out for the rush defense of the Aggies. They're giving up 5.4 yards per rush. Utah probably grind it out, but I still think Utah State gets the cover.
I lean under 43.5. The Aggies shut out last week by USC. Hour 2 on the way. Up next.
You say this is a smash. I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson.
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. You know, they've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy Sports Today, only on SportsGrid.
4 grabs in the first half for just over 30 yards, was injured, came back in briefly, and then had to be carted off.
We were pessimistic on Puka Nakua's injury to the same right knee, of that being a nothing, just a bursa, and that's it, as per Sean McVay. We felt there could be a small PCL component.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Everyone had him Rookie of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year. Bears are going to the Super Bowl. Blues Coach of the Year. He was terrible.
If he's going to be success, he's got to play within structure as much as possible. I get it. If the pocket breaks down, throw off the platform. That's fine. But within structure, when the play is there to be made, you need to make it, and he didn't do that.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
147 yards against the Jets and a touchdown? I mean, the numbers are incredible.
It's the Shanahan connection, and that's just what it feels like. And, Jordan Mason came into that game with a career 5.6 yards per carry. He's always been a very tough runner. He's always been good when called upon in small doses. You mentioned the yardage, which was impressive, but 28 carries. That's what I'm looking at.
Newswire, only on Sports.